a dark day on twitch.com, on youtube com.gov/org. 10 days ago, Matt Walsh canceled me on YouTube, publicly humiliating me. He shows the cat. We got the cat ears right off the bat. That's a win. So I think that this clip needs a little bit of context to kind of understand it fully. But we did a reaction videos to Matt Walsh's attack on asexual people. In that video, he took issue with people using the term asexual as a macro label broadly to refer to asexuality as a spectrum, which might include things like demisexual people, which might include things like people who experience a little sexual attraction, or people who experience romantic but not sexual attraction. He said that you can't be both bisexual and asexual. That's ridiculous. Terms can't do that. They have to be consistent. If that's going to be the position that you take, that, you know, your terms have to have a higher degree of consistency, that we want them to make a lot of sense, then we have to use micro-labels. Suppose there's somebody that experiences, like, a little bit of romantic attraction to both genders, but not sexual attraction to both genders. We could come up with a more specific micro-label, biromantic but asexual, for example. However, I'm guessing the survey that he's referring to didn't have options to label as biromantic and asexual. They probably didn't have like difference between romantic orientation versus sexual orientation. They would probably just have broader terms like bisexual, asexual. Macro labels as umbrella terms that don't have 100% consistency, it's fine as long as we understand what people mean. The purpose of language, the purpose of words is to communicate. If somebody understands what you mean, the etymological roots of a word aren't really that important. Bisexual people can be attracted to non-binary people, in addition to men and women, even though, in a most technical etymological sense, bi typically refers to two. But, you know, non-binary people, men, women, that would be like 3 different genders that we'd be referring to. There's no such thing as 100% consistency when it comes to any term, literally. It's been a long philosophical debate to try to define the word chair with 100% consistency. You can't do it. Philosophers have asked, what is a chair? A chair is something with 4 legs and a back that you sit on. That definition includes a horse. It's impossible to have 100% consistency when it comes to definitions, and that's okay. What is a man is another classic example of how 100% consistent language just is impossible. It was one of the famous philosophers, was it Plato or was it Aristotle, tried to ponder how can we define the term man, and after time and time again of trying different definitions, finding failures, things that didn't work, he eventually settled on featherless biped is the definition of a man. And then we think about people who might be missing a leg and they're no longer a biped, and you can't have definitions with 100% consistency. That's okay. We paint words in generalities, and that applies to asexual too.
But coherence is the point here. When the labels create...
Okay, so if coherence is the point, then you would prefer micro-labels. But when it comes to micro-labels for queer identity, Matt says that it's fart-sniffing mumbo-jumbo that shouldn't exist. That's where the logical inconsistency is.
If the label doesn't clarify, but rather creates more confusion...
Does it create confusion because the label itself doesn't make sense? Or because Matt is intentionally being obtuse in his interpretation of the label? Like, if you just Google, like, define asexuality or asexual, you'll find that the common definition, lack of sexual attraction to others, or low or absent interest and desire for sexual activity, it even considers having low or little sexual attraction as an option. I'm sure somebody can read the sentence, understand what it means, and could now understand, oh, somebody might experience a little sexual attraction to both genders, and that is completely within this definition provided. It's not confusing. Matt's just being intentionally obtuse.
Is that you label obsessively and constantly, but your labels don't make sense and they don't cohere. They contradict themselves. And you can't define any of them. That's the problem.
We just defined asexual right there. We can define all of these labels. I have no problem defining any label that I use.
You mentioned someone who identifies as both bisexual and asexual.
The big deception that Matt Walsh is using by saying bisexual, asexual is like a meat-eating vegan or a vegan who eats a little bit of meat. The difference is that asexual is a macro label typically used to describe a broader range of identities, while vegan is a micro label. Vegan has a lot more of a specific meaning. If we were going to go with like a more macro label, we could talk about like a plant-based diet spectrum. People that talk about like plant-based diets and a plant-based diet spectrum recognize the existence of people like semi-vegetarians who eat a little bit of meat, and they would still be on the plant-based diet spectrum, just like how somebody who experiences a little sexual attraction to both genders would be bisexual and on the asexual spectrum. We can actually fix the analogy so long as we recognize that vegan is a micro label, not a macro label, like asexual. Matt's also trying to act like the definition of vegan requires 100% consistency of never eating any meat ever. But these kind of debates happen in the vegan community. Is it vegan to eat lab-grown meat? That's a vegan debate. Vegans aren't sure. They're not 100% decided on that. It's a debate in the vegan community. Can you eat ethically sourced animal products? Things like if there was a beekeeper who's doing everything they can to ethically and humanely take care of their bees, who is collecting the amount of honey they can ethically, is it vegan to eat that honey? Some vegans would say yes, others wouldn't. There's a debate in the vegan community of if it's for your own survival, where eating meat is your only option to survive, can you still be a vegan if you ate meat then? There are debates around the boundaries of what is or is not vegan within the vegan community. Even if we go with a micro label like veganism, it doesn't have 100% consistency.
That's like saying that a meat-eating vegan is a vegan who eats only a little bit of meat.
Well, that would be a semi-vegetarian if we're going with kind of the micro labels. Plant-based diets do exist along a spectrum, and semi-vegetarians would be on that spectrum, just like how bisexuals who experience only a little sexual attraction are somewhere on the asexual spectrum. That's the analogy. Pescatarian would be another example of somebody on the plant-based diet spectrum who they only eat fish in every other way that they're a vegetarian.
Maybe there's some other adjective you can affix there.
Look at that just there. He said maybe some other adjective you can affix there. The word we're looking for is semi-vegetarian. It is a word that people use. But this shows that Matt Walsh is okay with micro-labeling when it comes to plant-based diets. Yet in the original asexual video, there were micro-labels, like for example, gray asexual, where a gray asexual person is somebody who experiences only a little bit of sexual attraction to others. Matt Walsh refused to use that label, calling it fart-sniffing mumbo-jumbo, that it doesn't make sense. So it seems that the problem isn't with macro-labeling or micro-labeling, because Matt seems to be fine to acknowledge that plant-based diets exist along a spectrum. He seems to be fine to acknowledge, these kinds of micro-labels, be it like a semi-vegetarian would make sense. His problem isn't with macro-labeling. His problem isn't with micro-labeling. His problem is with queer identity. That's the real issue to Matt.
The most obvious example, of course, is how you've eliminated masculine women from existence.
Okay, that's ridiculous. Watch this. If I Google masculine women and I go to images, ooh, looking at some hot tomboys. All right, can we get some muscle women? Muscle women? Ooh, now we're talking. Matt, if the woke ideologues have eliminated masculine women from existence, explain these hotties. Explain the muscle mommies. Can you do it? Because I certainly can. I love muscle mommies. Muscle mommies exist, absolutely. Muscle mommies, you are not erased. Get in my DMs. Trying to say that the left is like erasing gender nonconformity? Come on, Matt. We on the left love our femboys. We on the left, we stan our femboy kings. To try to pretend that on the left we are erasing gender nonconformity, if we were trying to erase gender nonconformity, why do we celebrate our femboy kings? Why does hashtag Femboy Friday trend on Twitter every week? That's the radical left doing. The radical left makes Femboy Friday trend on Twitter every week.
And furthermore, you're canceled. All of these people.
No! I'm canceled. So tragic.
You cannot be...
He didn't even address the cat ears, by the way. That's the most tragic part about that entire clip. We have Catboy Matt, and he did not address the Catboy Matt discourse. We need to come up with more insults for conservative pundits. I think it's the funniest shit ever. I've been obsessed with the phrase meatball Ron lately. That's the funniest shit I've ever seen. And specifically when Donald Trump went off on his little rant about how he's not gonna call meatball Ron DeSantis by that name because he doesn't even deserve to be called meatball Ron. Just like saying it so much while he's saying that he's not gonna call him Meatball Ron just solidifies Meatball Ron in the discourse. Meatball Ron is such a good insult because he looks just like a meatball. Look at that head. That's a meatball. Oh, we've got some classic Meatball Ron art going over here. I'm so glad we could talk about the Meatball Ron discourse. So I think that I had the best TikTok out of all those bunches, and unfortunately it's a point that's like really hard to make in just like a short video form. But glad we could expand on it here, have a better conversation about micro labels versus macro labels, why Matt's analogy doesn't work, and also why Matt's problem isn't with labels, but just with queer people. I want to cry for the child brides in the past. People always say, oh, but they were more mature then. I say, bull, they were still children. That's the way we change to view child marriage is wrong. Yeah, I mean, like, you had people who were still in high school getting married. In theory, you could definitely argue that with access to more information, there would be ways today that people could mature faster, but no, a 16-year-old is not ready to be married, to have a kid. All of the data we have to suggest shows that having children, typically around your mid to late 20s, is the best time as far as being fully mentally mature and developed, having the lowest rates of infant mortality. It's easier to become pregnant at like slightly younger ages than just like the mid 20s. The best risks of of the fetus surviving to term and being delivered as a living, breathing baby would be if you have your baby around the mid 20s. That seems to be the best for infant survival, which I think is probably one of the better metrics to go off of as far as like successful birth. As well as being mentally developed to actually take care of a child, and as far as, you know, having a career developed, having a stable income and family situation, those all seem a lot more important and a lot more feasible and just factually feasible in your mid-20s than when you're 16 years old. That's crazy. Wet mulch. That is a good one. I've heard that one before. What video would you have wished he responded to? I think it would have been interesting if he responded to my What is a Woman video, because I don't think there's any way that he could in good faith respond to that video. He would have had to go off on the chair analogy, being like, I can define a chair. Or actually, you know, I don't even know if he could respond to the chair analogy. The only way he could respond to the chair analogy is says, well, the whole point of words is that we're trying to paint generalities. It's not going to be 100% consistent because that's impossible. But if he says that, then he would have already conceded his definition of woman as an adult human female can have exceptions and is a generality which doesn't hold all the time. Under that world, a trans woman can be one of those exceptional cases, just like an intersex woman, for example. It would have been funny if he responded to the actual documentary. Being a chair sitter is one of the great privileges of my life. Now, I've heard people say that there are no differences between chairs and horses. Those people are idiots. I'm a transgender. That was a banger. Matt Walsh is officially canceled by Nominal.Naomi.